There is a number on your last blood test that your doctor may have glanced at, mentioned briefly, and then moved on from. Fasting glucose 103, or 108, or 115. Not diabetic, just a little high. Watch your diet, we will check again in a year. And that was that. Here is what that conversation did not include. 96 million Americans currently have prediabetes. That is nearly 1 in 3 adults. And over 50% of adults over 60 are estimated to have either prediabetes or type 2 diabetes, the majority without fully understanding what that number means for the years ahead. Here is what that number is actually telling you. Your cells have started to stop listening to insulin. Insulin is the hormone that unlocks the door to your cells and lets glucose enter to be used as fuel. When cells become resistant to insulin's signal, glucose stays in the bloodstream longer. The pancreas pumps out more insulin to compensate. Blood sugar climbs, the pancreas exhausts itself, and year by year the damage accumulates to the kidneys, the nerves, the eyes, and the cardiovascular system. The doctor's standard response to that borderline number is lifestyle changes. Lose weight, reduce carbohydrates, exercise more. Those things work, they are real. But here is what is almost never mentioned. A compound extracted from the roots and bark of several plants, used in traditional Chinese medicine for over 1400 years, has been compared directly to metformin, one of the most prescribed diabetes medications in the world. In a randomized clinical trial, the two produced comparable reductions in fasting blood glucose, 3-month blood sugar average, and blood sugar after meals, comparable to metformin, without the gastrointestinal side effects that cause 1 in 4 people to stop taking metformin in the first year. I have ranked 6 natural approaches to blood sugar regulation from least to most effective, and by the end of this video you will understand exactly what your cells need to start responding to insulin the way they used to. Drop a comment right now and tell me this. Has your doctor told you your blood sugar is borderline or pre-diabetic? Or are you already managing type 2? I read every one. Now let me show you what is happening inside your body after 60. Because this is not just about what you eat. Every cell in your body has insulin receptors on its surface. When insulin arrives and binds to these receptors, it triggers a cascade of signals that opens glucose transport channels. Glucose enters, energy is produced, blood sugar drops back to normal. Insulin resistance begins when this signal chain gets disrupted. The receptor responds weakly. The cascade fires less efficiently. Fewer glucose channels open. After 60, several things compound this problem at the same time. Fat stored in and around muscle cells interferes directly with insulin signaling in the muscle fiber, and fat distribution shifts with age, with more being stored around organs rather than under the skin. This visceral fat is metabolically active. It releases inflammatory compounds that impair insulin receptor function throughout the body. Mitochondrial function in muscle cells declines with age. Less efficient mitochondria means glucose is processed more slowly and spends more time in the bloodstream. And chronic low-grade inflammation, which increases after 60 across all body systems, impairs insulin signaling at multiple points in the cascade. You cannot see any of this happening. You cannot feel it, but it is there, every meal, every day. This is why the same diet that kept your blood sugar perfectly controlled at 45 may no longer be doing so at 65. Your biology changed, not just your habits. Your doctor will tell you to reduce refined carbohydrates, increase protein, and move more after meals. All correct. But that addresses the input into the system. It does not directly address the insulin signaling machinery itself. Certain natural compounds do that at the molecular level. Let me take you through all 6, starting at the bottom. At the bottom of this list, with a score of 2 out of 10, are over-the-counter blood sugar support supplements. Walk into any pharmacy and you will find them. Blood sugar support formulas, glucose balance complexes, usually combining chromium, bitter melon, gymnema sylvestre, and a handful of B vitamins. The ingredients are not without merit individually. Chromium plays a genuine role in insulin receptor signaling. Gymnema has some evidence for reducing glucose absorption in the gut, but these combination products spread a small budget across 6 or 7 ingredients. Every single compound ends up at a fraction of the dose used in the clinical trials that generated the evidence in the first place. You are buying a long ingredient label, not a therapeutic dose of anything. A systematic review of chromium supplementation specifically found that the blood sugar benefits were primarily seen in people who were already chromium deficient, and that at the low doses in most supplements, effects in people who were not deficient were not significant. Score, 2 out of 10. Moving up to number 5. Apple cider vinegar before meals. Score, 3 out of 10. This one has actual clinical evidence behind it, and unlike many popular natural health claims, the mechanism is real. Acetic acid, the active component of apple cider vinegar, slows the digestion of carbohydrates by inhibiting the enzymes that break down complex carbohydrates into glucose. Slower breakdown means slower glucose entry into the bloodstream and a blunted spike after meals. A study published in Diabetes Care found that 2 tablespoons of apple cider vinegar taken before a high carbohydrate meal significantly reduced the blood sugar response in people with insulin resistance. Where it falls short is fasting glucose. Apple cider vinegar works in the context of a meal. It does not address the underlying insulin resistance that keeps fasting glucose elevated even before you eat anything. It is a blunting tool, not a corrective one. Always dilute 1 to 2 tablespoons in a large glass of water. Undiluted apple cider vinegar erodes tooth enamel, and it can irritate the esophagus with regular use, which is a particular concern for anyone with a history of acid reflux. Score, 3 out of 10. Number 4. Ceylon cinnamon. Score, 6 out of 10. Before anything else on this entry, a warning that most people have never heard. There are 2 types of cinnamon: cassia, which is the dark reddish-brown cinnamon in most grocery store jars, most baked goods, and most supplements labeled simply as cinnamon, and Ceylon, also called true cinnamon, which is lighter, more delicate, and botanically different. Cassia cinnamon contains high levels of a compound called coumarin. At the quantities involved in daily therapeutic supplementation, coumarin intake from cassia cinnamon can reach levels associated with liver toxicity. The European Food Safety Authority has issued specific warnings about this. Ceylon cinnamon contains negligible coumarin. For daily therapeutic use, Ceylon is the only safe option. The evidence for Ceylon cinnamon on blood sugar is genuine. Multiple randomized controlled trials have shown that its compounds improve insulin sensitivity by activating insulin receptors directly, partly mimicking insulin's own signaling mechanism at the cellular level. A meta-analysis of 10 randomized trials found that cinnamon supplementation significantly reduced fasting blood glucose, with an average reduction of approximately 24 milligrams per deciliter. The dose is 1 to 3 grams of Ceylon cinnamon daily, taken with meals. Look for products that say Cinnamomum verum on the label. That is the botanical name for Ceylon. If the label just says cinnamon, it is almost certainly cassia. Score, 6 out of 10. Number 3. Fenugreek seeds soaked overnight. Score, 7 out of 10. This is the ingredient that has been sitting in Indian kitchens for 3,000 years, and the clinical evidence has confirmed what traditional medicine already knew. Fenugreek seeds are extraordinarily high in a specific type of soluble fiber called galactomannan, which forms a viscous gel when it contacts water. When this gel forms in the digestive tract around a carbohydrate-containing meal, it physically slows the absorption of glucose across the intestinal wall. The same sugar enters the bloodstream, but over a much longer period, giving insulin time to process it without the sharp spike. But the evidence goes beyond fiber mechanics. Fenugreek also contains an unusual amino acid called 4-hydroxyisoleucine, found almost exclusively in fenugreek, that has been shown in clinical studies to directly stimulate insulin secretion and improve peripheral insulin sensitivity. A randomized controlled trial found that 10 grams of fenugreek seeds soaked overnight and eaten with breakfast significantly reduced fasting blood glucose and improved glucose tolerance in people with type 2 diabetes after 8 weeks. A separate study in newly diagnosed type 2 diabetes patients found that 1 gram per day of fenugreek extract significantly improved insulin resistance scores over 2 months. The correct preparation is simple. Soak 1 tablespoon of whole fenugreek seeds in a glass of water overnight. In the morning, eat the seeds before breakfast. The whole seed delivers the full fiber benefit. A bag of whole fenugreek seeds costs about $2 to $4 and lasts weeks. This is one of the most affordable and evidence-backed foods on this entire list. One important caution: fenugreek lowers blood sugar meaningfully. If you are already taking diabetes medication or insulin, this combination requires monitoring and your doctor's direct awareness. Score 7 out of 10. Number 2. Alpha-lipoic acid. Score 8 out of 10. Alpha-lipoic acid is a naturally occurring antioxidant that your body produces in small amounts and that is found in trace quantities in foods like spinach, broccoli, and organ meats. And it has one of the most direct mechanisms for improving insulin resistance of any compound on this list. Alpha-lipoic acid activates an enzyme called AMPK, which stands for adenosine monophosphate activated protein kinase. AMPK is the master metabolic switch in your cells. When it is activated, it triggers glucose uptake in muscle cells independent of insulin signaling. The muscle cell opens its glucose transport channels without waiting for insulin's signal. This means alpha-lipoic acid bypasses the broken part of the insulin resistance pathway instead of trying to repair it. At the same time, it reduces the oxidative stress inside muscle cells. That is one of the primary drivers of insulin resistance in the first place. It is addressing both the symptom and the cause simultaneously. A meta-analysis of randomized controlled trials found that alpha-lipoic acid supplementation significantly reduced fasting glucose and insulin resistance scores in adults with metabolic syndrome and type 2 diabetes. The dose is 300 milligrams of the R form of alpha-lipoic acid, which is the biologically active form, taken on an empty stomach. Alternatively, 600 milligrams of standard alpha-lipoic acid produces a similar effect, but requires a higher dose because the product contains both the active and inactive forms. One important caution: alpha-lipoic acid lowers blood sugar meaningfully. If you are on diabetes medication, monitor your glucose closely and involve your doctor. Score 8 out of 10. And here it is. Number 1. Berberine. Score 9 out of 10. Berberine is an alkaloid compound extracted from the roots and bark of several plants, including barberry and the Chinese herb known in traditional medicine as huangbo. Traditional Chinese medicine used it for over 1400 years to treat a condition described as excessive thirst and frequent urination. They were describing diabetes long before blood glucose tests existed. In 2008, a randomized clinical trial published in the journal Metabolism compared berberine directly to metformin in 116 patients with newly diagnosed type 2 diabetes. Both groups received 500 milligrams 3 times daily. The results stopped researchers in their tracks. Berberine and metformin produced virtually identical reductions in 3-month blood sugar average, nearly identical reductions in fasting blood glucose, nearly identical reductions in blood sugar after meals. The metformin group had significantly more gastrointestinal side effects, the nausea and cramping that cause 1 in 4 people to stop taking it in the first year. The berberine group had significantly fewer. The mechanism explains why the results are so similar. Berberine activates the same AMPK pathway as alpha-lipoic acid and metformin. It also inhibits an enzyme in the gut that breaks down carbohydrates into glucose, slowing the rate at which sugar enters the bloodstream, and it directly improves insulin receptor expression on cell membranes. 3 separate pathways at once. A 2023 meta-analysis of 46 randomized controlled trials confirmed that berberine significantly reduced 3-month blood sugar average, fasting glucose, and insulin resistance scores compared to placebo, with results consistent across 3 decades of study data. The dose is 500 milligrams 3 times daily, taken 15 to 30 minutes before meals. Taking it before eating allows it to be present in the gut when carbohydrate digestion begins. Cost is $20 to $35 per month. Now here is the most important caution on this entire list, and I want you to read this carefully. Berberine lowers blood sugar meaningfully. If you are already taking metformin, insulin, sulfonylureas, or any other blood sugar medication, combining it with berberine without your doctor's direct involvement can cause hypoglycemia, which is dangerously low blood sugar. This is not a theoretical risk, it is a documented real one. Do not add berberine to an existing diabetes medication regimen without speaking to your doctor first. This is not optional. Score 9 out of 10. Here is where you start. If your fasting glucose is borderline and you are not on any medication, begin with Ceylon cinnamon this week. 1 to 2 grams with your largest meal. Safe, affordable, and provides a measurable baseline effect. Add soaked fenugreek seeds in week 2. 1 tablespoon soaked overnight, eaten before breakfast. In week 3, add 300 milligrams of R-form alpha-lipoic acid on an empty stomach in the morning. If after 4 weeks you want a stronger approach and you are not on medication, 500 milligrams of berberine 3 times daily before meals is the most evidence-backed natural option available. Rate your fasting glucose today. Note it. Measure again at 4 weeks and 8 weeks. If you are already on diabetes medication, do not change, add, or adjust anything on this list without your doctor's direct involvement. 96 million Americans have been handed a borderline number and told to watch their diet. Most of them will be back in that same office in a year with a number that has gotten worse because watching your diet alone does not activate AMPK, does not reduce intracellular fat, and does not improve the insulin signaling machinery inside your cells. These compounds do. Your cells have not forgotten how to respond to insulin. The signal is just not getting through clearly anymore. These compounds help clear the line. Start tonight. Ceylon cinnamon with dinner. That is your first step. If this gave you a clear answer after being handed a number and sent home with vague advice,